Hi everybody, this is Pippa from Business Without Bullshit, and this week we're talking to Paul Webster, also known as Webby, Principal of International Expansion Partners and AUS UK Limited, whatever that is.
What is that, Paul?
That's a business that helps companies navigate international expansion. We want to de-risk it, accelerate it, help you succeed, whether you're expanding, relocating, or consolidating your operations across international borders.
And Paul is actually no Muppet. He is Australian, but you know, we'll forgive him of that. But he's worked both commercially and in the government. And as a result, he can really explain some of either side that you're trying to understand. I'm particularly interested in how the government functions, but it's that discussion I found fascinating. Anything you liked, Pippa, at all?
I think it was much more interesting than we're making it sound right now.
Exactly. So check it out.
If you need to translate government and business, get in touch. Watch this.
Yeah. So, Paul, what's keeping Paul up at night? Oh, sorry. So I've got to get used to. I just can't get my head around.
I replied to both. It's fine.
So, Webby, what's keeping you up at night?
I think it's not nervousness, it's excitement. So the AUS UK Free Trade Agreement, FTA, it's something that's in my world is very exciting. It's going to double, forecast is by government, it'll double the activity between Australia and the UK in the next 5 years, so an extra £11 billion of activity. But on top of that, with one of the hidden gems is something very exciting, the Procurement Act of 2023.
That sounds like a thrill.
Oh, that sounds exciting, Webby. Tell us more.
Breathing. So I know it's ridiculous to be excited by this, but where it's the bit that I'm excited about with the FTA is both governments are committing to opening up their 350 to 400 billion pound market in government procurement to SMEs between the markets. Before you couldn't do it. There's no way you could bid as an Australian company to UK contracts, and there was no way a British company without Australian presence could bid for Australian SME work in government. That's going to change in October this year. So that's kind of the hidden jewel that I want to extract from the soil and really bring to light and put the shine on that diamond.
Man, that was a long metaphor. I mean, it was an impressive metaphor, but it was a long one.
Got there.
Do you think that, is that just stronger together? Is it, where do we see these countries are coming together from the free trade agreement? I mean, how does this really benefit? To be devil's advocate, would someone say, well, that's just, there's more opportunity in the UK. We're a bigger country. Why should we,
You are a bigger country, but you don't involve SMEs more in government procurement. Australia actually has 11 billion going out to SMEs in pounds, 20 billion Australian, 11 billion pounds roughly. The UK, according to British Chambers, last year only did like 105,000 companies did about 32,000 each, about 3.7 billion pounds. So there was actually 3 times as much money occurring in the Australian government SME market.
So there's quite an opportunity for British companies to go and pitch for Australian procurement.
Because theoretically, they should be dealing with more scale, but we all know the NHS isn't a national service. It's made up of a collection of over 200 trusts. But theoretically, they should have more scale and experience to take into the Australian market. The downside is British government has a lot of archaic systems.
Why do you think it is that Australia has more modern digital systems than the UK?
I'm going to put it down to it's the scale. So if we look at RBS, NatWest, and you had the great Kiwi, Ross McEwen, running RBS, and he had to decouple 200 branches. This is an example. From NatWest under the EU fair competition policy. He couldn't untangle 200 branches to create Williams Glen. He'd rather give £700 million to his competitors than go through that IT project. That is quite a scary thought, that's how complicated the big institutions are here.
And is it just that we've got so many, like over here, we've just had years and years and years and years and years of history, and people haven't kind of like got rid of one thing, put something else in. They've added to what was there already, and you end up with this crazy.
I think the statistic was RBS has 6,000 systems.
Jesus.
And that's why they gave 700 million to the European Commission to give to their competitors, because they said, we actually can't finish that simple task of segregate 200 branches and create a new mini bank challenger.
The bank's a great example, aren't they? Because I know there's a guy I know who does the really old 70s code. I mean, these are mainframes for the bank that are incredibly reliable, built in the 70s. And I mean, you think about the reliability a bank has to have. You can't be logging into your bank account and they go, not sure.
Roughly.
You know, it would create so they've got these sort of old mainframes that are just sort of, and how do you untangle that? You've got 5 million customers on a 70s mainframe and it's working. Maybe really basic. But there's a sort of gap there for me. It's like, well, there were banks in Australia, you know, surely.
I think we were smaller and we made the transition earlier. So if I look at CommBank going from a state-owned entity in the early 90s to private, still was a journey for 12 to 15 years. But when they went in 2005 to 2012, they really went to a thin core, more modern digital application, and they became a data business. And an example is they realize they're a data business. They have more jobs being recruited now for data consultants. Their first business unit, they've got a new business unit, which is the data insights for their customers. And if you look at the way the banks no longer wait for the central bank to tell them what's happening to the economy, because they look at it and go, well, if you're a big bank in Australia, you have 20-ish% of the market, maybe 28% if you're the biggest. You see more transactions in real time than the central bank. I don't need to wait for you to tell me. I can see it. So I think the Australians were faster at adapting to that. And because they were smaller, they were more agile. But I think there is more opportunity here, but it is more complicated.
The geography must play a part too. I mean, you're just a massive, I mean, I consider you Australian, British. So, you know, Australia is this massive place always. So even back in the 70s and 80s, they must have said, well, the geezers in the outback, it would take them 2 days to come to the local bank. You know, there must be an aspect of that, I would imagine.
Well, each state had its state-owned bank and had its own state bank governing or legislative act, which then required its board and the IT, et cetera, to be based in that state. So Bank West, now a sub of CommBank, was run under the Bank of West Australian Act. Bank of South Australia was South Australia Bank, and across the country. So you did have this fragmented market more so than the UK, but then they've all consolidated over the last 20 odd years.
So great opportunity for the SMEs.
Yeah, massive.
And putting the word on the street there. So is that happened yet? Or when's it happening that I can go?
Happening. So on the SME, the Procurement Act's October, the Geek Fest kicks you off. That's the bit I'm excited about.
Will it still be October, even?
It's already passed and had royal assent. Fine. So it comes in force. It's coming into force
in October.
So otherwise,
Unless somebody does an amendment to it now.
I think this is something they'd all agreed to, giving small business more fair competitive share, etc. The FTA side, we saw food and drink move straight away. Like the Australian produce volumes have increased straight away. We saw the first tax-free sugar pork come in. We saw wine, we saw beef, we saw seafood come in. And it's not the stuff that's competing with British farmers, which people might believe in the press. It's a different type of product. It's premium Wagyu, grass-fed. You don't have it here.
Is anything going the other way, or is it just
British
one-way traffic?
Pork sausages. Massive.
Okay. There's so many jokes there that I'm not even going to touch.
Whiskey is massive. So whiskey, obviously, big product coming in on food and drink.
We're getting a bad image of Australians with like
we make a surprise
sausages.
You're surprised. We're eating your food, drinking your booze, and you're like, what? You're like us. Yeah.
I find that one very interesting because joining the European Union in 1973, we destroyed Australia's economy, and New Zealand, all the butter would come from New Zealand and the lamb would come from New Zealand. My old man talks about that's what you would see on the shelf. And then it became, we all have French butter now. So whether politically, what side of the line you were on in terms of fairness, but at the end of the day, we had all of Europe supplying us trade-free. I guess they still can under the free trade agreement, but there's just a little more friction because if it's made in Europe.
Yeah.
So really now we're just opening ourselves back up to Australia, and that is we can still, the farmers here can still sell to Europe, and now they can sell to Australia. Free trade is what we believe in. So therefore,
and I would break this down into how much of the market we're talking about. Britain imports about half of its food. only 1% of that currently is coming from Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah.
So if Australia doubles its market share,
It's still only 2%.
it's not Rob. It's
that maths.
lawyers are amazing. And it's the part where we go, we're tackling the Australian opportunity and New Zealand opportunity is to grow the imported market share, not take away from the British farmer. I live in a rural community and we're very conscious of the impact on that. And it is something they need to get their message out. It's different products that are in the imported market that the Australians are contesting. Equally, when we look at the British side on what they can sell to Australia, it's one of the fastest growing countries in the world and it's a gateway to Southeast Asia. So why wouldn't you want to be selling down there? And together we're 100 million people free trade market.
It's quite nice when you say that we're 100 million people together, for sure. I mean, I'm very pro the history. I think too, you think about climate change and how it's affecting, people doomsday about, future shocks to supply chains, particularly amongst food and drink. I mean, ultimately, maybe we need as much supply as we can get.
That is the food security argument. In the same way we have energy security, water security, we have those three things. We have a happy population. So I think food security, this is a standards that are acceptable to the British public with an alternative supply and alternative supply routes. So no one can cut you off let's just say in Eastern Europe. We have other ways to get here.
Yeah. And people may think, well, it's bloody miles away. It's like, well, a lot of stuff is air freighted, but from Australia, it will come on a boat. And if you do the mathematics, it's tiny, the cost.
So the cost is in transport's 4% versus if I was trucking it from the south of Europe versus putting it on a container ship, the carbon imprint on the container ship for that distance relative to the trucking, you get to its relatively immaterial difference.
Okay, so it's the same difference.
I have actually asked one of the consultancies to map it for me so I could articulate it so that we could hand on heart say the data says there's no environmentally worse or better, but I'm still waiting for that data.
Presumably the one difference is time. Or not?
Depends on the shelf life of the product. So if you're doing fresh seafood, you got to put it on the plane, and it's got to get here quick. So that time does matter. But for raw commodities, rice. So when Europe had a drought last summer, they didn't have rice. They imported Australian rice for the first time.
Right.
So the great public company, so public information, 0 to 23 million for sunrice last year in the UK. I mean, that's a fantastic example of what it does.
That's quite a...
Europe got rice, Australia got an export. That's what we're talking about. It's a win-win.
Let's talk about a different trade sector if people are concerned that they feel it's a bit one-sided. To be fair, Australia and New Zealand are an amazing ground for starting companies. It's, a less competitive market. I always think Australia's got a great feedback loop because people are quite honest about stuff or very direct. But for them, it's somewhat the other way. That they come here, they come to the UK to build their technology businesses and stuff. Yeah. It goes both ways. I'm thankful to now hear a little bit. Previously, the UK had sort of forgotten about Australia as far as I could work out,
So Dark Trace, the great firm out of Cambridge, they've got an office in New Zealand and Singapore, and they're very aggressive down under, doing well. We look at British Telecom, still selling throughout. Where we've seen it harder for the British firms is they come in thinking, I'm big in the UK, I'm going to smash it down under, and then realise, actually, the Aussies are quite tech savvy. You've got to have something unique, and you're up against established oligopolies. So like the banking, the four banks, they're there, but you've got to be sharp. And with the Aussies, they come here with their tech going, we're small, but we've got something really exciting, but we need your people, your market, your capital to really make it fly. And they'll come here much younger than you would see the Brits go down under. The Brits will say, I'm big in UK. I've looked at EU or US. Maybe I'll learn to go international in Australia because it's a safe market and I can experiment there before I go and burn a lot of money in America. And I think that's a very sensible approach.
What do you think if you were advising a UK company about going to Australia, what would be the primary cultural differences in business you would tell them to be aware of?
Everyone will meet you for coffee. That's fine. But that doesn't mean they'll do business with you, and they'll probably more likely to give you a fast no over a coffee and go, look, that's great. Good to meet you. I can't see this happening. and they're not being rude. They think they're
That's
actually...
nice though. That is so much better than you meet somebody for a coffee, you say, let's keep in touch. I'm sure we could do something in the future. And neither of you mean it.
So
and it's such a waste of everybody's time.
We say culturally, you got to train the Brits to say no.
Yeah.
Whereas I think that's probably the big one, is it's not rudeness. They're very friendly, and they'll still see you for a beer and go, oh, I said we'd no do a deal, but yeah, I'll see you for a beer next Thursday.
And the reverse applies, doesn't it? The advice to the Australians coming here is, you know, actually, probably they should say no, but the British don't. We sort of mean no. We actually just mean, I don't know. You know, that I'm going to spend 2 years thinking about it. You know, I mean,
that's really interesting. Really means no, right?
It means no right now, but because of the fact we leave it a bit open, we end up meeting them again a year later.
I know.
And then it happens again.
Another awkward conversation and another one.
Well, the third one, we just decide, well, fuck it now, I better go all in and buy something.
I mean, if we could export awkwardness, we'd make so much money.
We do, it's our humour.
But I think, the humour is very similar.
It is very similar.
One of the things I'd say, going on the culture part, the humour in Australia, I've migrated 11 years ago. The humour and cultural sensitivities have changed in that time. And you find this bunch of expats where the sense of humour and way of life when it was 10, 20 years ago is not the same and not politically acceptable. So you just have to watch yourself. But equally, if you're Brits going down under, Australians aren't that sensitive and they abbreviate everything, and it's not meant to be culturally insensitive.
No.
Sometimes I kind of like the abbreviation thing though. I think it's funny.
It's funnier when the word gets longer. Sometimes they abbreviate something and add O's. Yeah. I always say something slightly controversial because I ended up in a few difficult conversations over Brexit and stuff, only because I've worked with Aussies and Kiwis so much, and I found that people in this country were very much, we're Europe, and I remember a very intelligent friend of mine saying, but why do I care about Australia? And I was like, well, because about 60,000 of them died for us, during a couple of wars. That's a huge thing to throw on the table, but I think it's like, I don't think we should completely forget our history. The Australian point of view, if people aren't aware, was Britain is the homeland and they are there to protect us. This then after the Second World War, in the 50s and 60s, we were a bit broke and Australia started to go, I'm not sure they can protect us actually. They seem to be, a bit buggered. And then we did European Union, which may have been a brilliant idea for the country on some level, but we basically cut off the Commonwealth. There was no free trade anymore. Biggest recession Australia and New Zealand ever suffered. I think still to this date, we basically, completely buggered up the economy, and it was massive for them. It was a sense of almost abandonment, and nobody knows that here. And that I don't know how important that is to know these days, but
it probably is worth saying Australians look to America and Britain.
Well, you've just really cut us to the quick there.
Well,
for defence, you're meaning, or just generally?
For defence, definitely.
Yeah.
And this is why the AUKUS agreement is so wonderful for everyone, because we're all wonderfully strategically placed in the world.
AUKUS is the submarines.
More than that, actually. And on technologies where there's a British opportunity as well. There's Pillar 1, big nuclear subs. Pillar 2 is critical technologies, advanced technology. So cybersecurity, hypersonics. What else are we looking at? I think guided weapons, and we're going into a whole bunch of super tech stuff. Space will be a part of that. It's not listed as one of the critical, but you can't do a lot of this stuff with
drones, anti-drones,
autonomous vehicles, and robotics is another one. All of it is also linked to space. On the trade side, on the UK, we definitely have a huge affiliation. You look at Anzac Day, it is a Memorial Day. It's a very somber remembering what happened on April 25 on Gallipoli. But the afternoon is remember what they died for, and let's go and have a great afternoon and party. And I love that bit. Let's celebrate the freedoms they gave us. And we look to Britain for that. However, I think at the end of World War II, when the Europe War was over, the Pacific War was on, Britain sort of forgot about that part. And
that's the US part, right?
That's the US part. So
we were like, oh, we're done. And we kind of forgot about it.
It was a bit like, can we have our guys back? Quickly, please.
Yeah, right.
Because Papua New Guinea was Australia then.
Yes, of course. Okay.
It was still under Australian rule and before it became independent. And so we was like, can we have our people to defend our country that's being invaded, please?
Right.
And we got them back, but literally...
Because Japan had invaded Papua New Guinea at the time.
So the famous Battle of Kokoda. And the troops landed just in time. And the reserves did a great job
And the Aussies and Kiwi troops are revered, actually, if you look at the historical archive of what they were considered in. I mean, we'll move on back to trade, but if you look at what the Brits thought of the Aussies and the Kiwis, they were amazing people because they were tough, a lot of them.
Bit loony.
But I mean, in terms of trade, like you would be stupid, right, not to look at the US with its millions and millions and millions of potential customers versus the UK, which is so very much smaller.
Oh,
It's an interesting one.
It just seems like a stupid thing to do, to go, we've got a closer familial relationship with the UK, so we'll forget about the US.
So Australians, when the study's done, Australians always look at US and UK are number one, number two, and that flips sometimes. But predominantly UK is number one because the message has got out. You go to the United States, it's very complicated. Yeah. Depending on your product. If you're in medtech, lifestyle, a regulated industry, oh my gosh, like 50 different states you're going to line up with. It's expensive. Compare salaries of England to even regional United States, America's expensive. When you look at England, it's 70 million people or 70 million people by 2027. It's a single regulated market. It's culturally very similar, sense of humor. You're not have to be worried about you're going to trip over things. The commercial elements, the concepts are the same. We might have slightly differences in the way the legal wordings that you pick come into a contract, but the concept's the same and it's easier to understand and do business in Britain. So whilst it's a smaller market, it's a the fifth, sixth, depending on exchange rates, still exciting market. If you're coming out of a market of 25, 26 million people and you come here with 70 million people, but it's simple, it's fantastic. And you can get up and down the country in 2 hours from London. You go ping 2 hours north, 2 hours south, 2 hours west. You've covered 80%.
I always enjoy an Australian turning up saying, no, I've rented a car. I'm going to drive here. I'm going to drive there. And I'm like, that's going to be exhausting. You know, it's a sort of, it'll take a bit more out of you. And I think don't underestimate the softer issues. You know, when I look at Australia, it's the underpinning relationships, you know, that you've got a family here still, or, you know, the Brits will go to Australia as a place that they go and do a gap year or whatever, you know. But there's this huge, and those are really important. I find that with clients and relationships, the fact that your daughter's come to university here or Australia, that's going to drive your behavior. You know, there's less of that with America.
I had sorry, this is a totally random anecdote, but I had a great aunt and uncle in Australia. And when my great aunt died, the uncle sent a ring to each of their nieces, their great nieces in the UK. So I had this ring, and I'd been told, the story was that my great uncle was walking along a riverbed in Australia, and he looked down and he saw this stone and he thought it looked interesting and he picked it up and it turned out to be a sapphire, and he had it cleaned and put in a ring for his
that's lovely,
his wife. So I had this ring. I took it, it was a couple of the diamonds had fallen out of it, what have you. So I took it to a jeweler and said, can you make me a new ring using this stone? She was like, yeah, absolutely. Rang me up 2 days later. Yeah, I just need to talk to you. Turns out the stones are fake.
I don't know who that.
So I'm guessing the entire story was fabrication.
Oh, maybe. It's a nice story.
Fabrication.
Don't let the truth get away with a good story.
Australians.
Now, Paul, you've done a lot of different things. You've gone between private and public. You're going back into the private sector. So just simply speaking, what do you do?
Add insight to international expansion to help companies de-risk, accelerate and succeed in international expansion, relocation or consolidation.
And how do you do that?
Different levels, I guess a consultant answer. It depends on what the problem is with the client. But the first one is we can financial model international locations. Where is the best place? So we start with, or taking a step back, we would start with why are you looking internationally? What is the objective you're trying to achieve? And based on that, is it cut costs? Is it expand a market? Is it innovate? Based on that, we would look at different markets for different purposes. From there, we would go into financial modeling, looking at industry clusters, centers of excellence, and help you narrow in that part. And once we got a long list of places, we'd go deeper. Where are we going to get support on the ground? Where are you going to be successful? We go to a short list, and then we start getting you the best deal possible from the local government agencies, supporting you to get the best hand-holding, working with the best advisors in market. So coming to the UK, working with Ori Clark, getting the accounting, getting the legal, getting the advice you need around recruitment and people, how to grow your business successfully, quickly, and avoid the trapdoors.
But you're country agnostic?
Correct.
Okay.
Very much so. So it doesn't matter in which direction you go, we're here to help you expand internationally. And that's why it's called International Expansion Partners.
And how did you end up doing this?
As a profession?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a long road. Studied international management. Really always just...
In Australia?
In Australia, back in the 90s, early 2000s.
You're from Melbourne?
No, Perth boy.
Perth
boy, moved... so studied in Perth, came to UK, went back, did an MBA, focused on international management, studied in Germany on international management, interesting on EU integration, which I hadn't realised how that would be reversed so quickly.
Yeah.
When they came up. And I was in banking, property finance, commercial finance, corporate treasury, in like a very, what you call broad generalist in the bank. Was in the mergers during 2008, 9. That was really interesting, tiring, but really interesting. And then after a while, I ended up in insurance, life insurance, because when you have pension in Australia, you get life insurance automatic.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Well, every company that does superannuation, which is now, 11% on top of your salary.
Yeah.
You also get life insurance.
You must get life insurance.
A lot of life insurance, or it's just like a
reasonable.
Fixed?
Enough. I can't remember what the number is, but it's probably in the 3 to 5 times.
If you don't have life insurance,
it attractive to get rid of your spouse.
Every, I'd say, white collar Australian has come to the conclusion they're worth more dead than alive to their family.
I mean, it's good advice. If you haven't got life insurance and you're listening to this and you have any dependents, a partner or kids, I know insurance can be a bit off-putting, but please go and buy life insurance. It's not very expensive.
Yeah. And in that role, we live that daily. And this is a long answer to your question. Twice a week, we would have contentious claim meetings. And it would be, are we paying the claim on that person? And a contentious claim would be their direct debit missed a beat, but they've been members for 7 years. Are you not going to pay out because they missed it by like a day? Like,
isn't the answer yes, we're not going to pay out?
No, because when you're part of a big brand...
Yeah, reputation here.
You've got to get on social media now.
Long-term, you've got to take the long-term view. And you start getting quite morbid, or if I dare say, Undertaker humour. And it got to the point where my wife was like, yeah, you need to change jobs.
Move jobs. I'll take advantage of the life insurance.
There was quite a bad accident in Papua New Guinea, and I'm reading the paper and I'm like having my cereal and ring one of the team and say, have you run the names? That's your reaction. I was like, yeah, because it could be a really expensive day. And she's like, 7 people have lost their family. And you're like, that's 7 checks. And I'm not picking up the vibe at all. And she's like, you're not right. And I was like, what do you mean? Went to work and went, she said this. And they're like, yeah, you're not right.
Hey, so an insurance company by nature is incentivized to say no, but are you as individuals incentivized to say no?
No. This is a big difference where you have to say this is a cultural thing in Australia versus England. I think England is very contractual.
Yeah,
in
computer
that way.
says no.
I think there's a little bit more relationship focus and brand valuation consideration. And this is on the verge of, Twitter sponsorships were coming out at annual conferences about a year or 2 earlier. So we're talking like, 2010s early stage. But that was when I was like, do you know what? This doesn't light my boat. I'm doing it because I'm a consultant. This is interesting. Like I was life insurance for 1 in 7 Australians. And you're like, that's kind of, you see everything. And to your point about having life insurance, it was so powerful to see what you could make a difference to a family in that horrible time. And actually the things people don't talk about, the banks are incredible at those times. Like generally, if you've got a good bank, what they do for a family in a time of need is absolutely outstanding, but they'll never brag about it because you never would.
Yeah.
But no one talks about the work they do. And that was one thing, I was very proud of the team at that bank and how they dealt with everything in that case. And an example of, we talk about insurance, there's probably two professions, and one of your recent guests, the dental environmental. I thought there's two industries where you go, they are the best reps for their own product. Dentists always have amazing teeth.
Oh my God. You kept saying Simon's teeth are just like ding.
Yeah. Like, would you go to a dentist who had shocking teeth? You wouldn't. Everyone who works in insurance is overinsured.
The other one is hairdressers, just to be clear.
No, but they don't cut their hair. No, someone else does.
That's what I mean. You have to look in the salon at the other hair person. Of other people.
Yeah. Okay.
So anyway, that. But I've seen some hairdressers.
Yeah, I know.
Because that's the best example.
What am I doing here?
Keep walking. Never saw that shop. So that was the let's make a change. And that's when the British government were looking for a new head of Australia and New Zealand to bring Australian Kiwi companies to the UK. And that's when I had other offers on the table, but that's something I'd always been passionate about. And my corporate coach at the time, twice it came up in 5 years as my top 3 job, international trade and investment. And so we went, and I thought, we'll see how we go. Loved it. And then the UK government asked me to come over to the UK in 2013, and 10 years flew by, and it was, I absolutely loved it. It was completely different, helping companies grow, exciting technology, internationalization, commercial elements of navigating a dodgy pathway, because there's missteps if you don't get good advice. And the number of people you have to say, invest in advice, we'll do it ourselves. No one told us about this.
It's really hard, isn't it, getting the line between when to invest in advice, when you should work it out yourself. It's they're quite tricky roads to walk down. I always think those jobs, though, they're great. I remember my friend writing down, I said, well, what do you really want to do? And he's like, well, I want to sort of travel around the world and I want to help people. And, by the end, I said, you've basically described James Bond as far as I can work out. But there's an element of which Department of Business.
I want to sleep with a different woman in every town.
It was a bit like that. I want to be, we still laugh about it. I was like,
no paperwork. You don't see James Bond going.
And I'd quite like to carry a gun.
Yeah. I think we almost joked that at the end, and I was like, that is James Bond's job. But it is a little, there is an aspect of which you meet lots of interesting people. You're there to help them. International trade is interesting, going from country to country, because people appreciate the help. You try and help people within their own country, they are much more combative about it. I can't think of it. It's probably not the right word, but they're much more like, resistant. That's not what I read online or whatever. Do you know what I mean? If you're going into Oz and you're there to be an expert, they're like, great, help me. I don't know anything,
Well, and also you've got to say to people, there's a value for your time. Like, I don't know how many companies you guys would help every year, but you would have seen it before.
Yeah, 300 we help a year in the country. Yeah.
So basically, well, you're doing more than one every day coming through, one and a bit every, and 25 a month. And you're going through you would see it over, how old's the company? 100?
Yeah, almost.
So you sort of go, you've just seen it. You've seen people go through trapdoors, and the entrepreneur go, this is different. Nah, but the employment law's not, and migration's not. And there's a pathway and a sequence to do things. And it's that experience of helping.
It's taken ages to work out some of the things we do. And actually, it's not that crazy. Like, I remember taking someone on a trip to Australia, and we had 50 meetings in a week. Because, by the way, when you go to Australia, people really appreciate it. They turn up on time, and you can do 50 meetings in a week, and they all come to meet you. And it was like, remember the girl I was with, Lorena, she was like, after the first day, she was like, oh my God, how do you know all that stuff? And I was like, give it another day. By day 3, she was like, you just keep saying the same stuff. And I'm like, yeah. It's like there are literally probably 50 things. I mean, I don't know how many there are. Maybe there are 200, but maybe there's 20 in any situation that we tell a client that have taken us an awful long time to work out, know, and we're still working them out, and it's how you say them too. It's how to say to an Aussie, listen, superannuation. Yes, I know that. Right. Well, there's this thing over here that's a bit like it. And they're like, great, I'm in, as opposed to sort of starting from scratch saying we have something called the auto enrollment scheme.
Because that's such a logical link to pension.
Yeah. What an idiot. And do you have like a long-term goal? Do you have like a where you're trying to get to?
Ooh, long-term goal. I think it's to really build ourselves to be one of the most knowledgeable solution providers for business. Is that goal? I think we have personally, to work with the British government, it was a real blessing. Going to travel 60-odd cities around the world, train the network up, and building that towards that. That's really exciting and interesting. And there are so many jigsaws out there that, it's not just one jigsaw that you're trying to solve. There's lots of jigsaws, because if you're going to go to America, and which state in America, we've got a different jigsaw puzzle for you, and we've got a different pathway for someone else. So, yeah, working with that in a global, across the NATO-aligned markets, more specifically, that's
building those bridges.
Yeah, that's a good phrase, actually. Building the bridges.
What would you say the biggest problem is facing international expansion?
Ministers that change every year. I served more.
Keep changing the brand names too.
Oh yeah.
Which did it come out? Was it Foreign Office or?
I was originally hired under FCO, which became FCDO. I then worked for UKTI, which was under BIS, which became BES. And then UKTI became a department, so that became DIT. Yeah. Which then they didn't like that. So then there's the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation. Then there's
DBT.
And then Energy got pulled out to Department of Energy and Energy Security Net Zero. So
people must have been like turning up for work. No, Bob, your office is over there now. But it's all the same. It's like, no, just go over there. And the sign's changed. It's like,
and then DBT, so Business and Trade, is pulled out from that. So you really got to keep up with the...
What the hell? Someone said to me, it's 100 million it costs to do the last brand change. And any business, anyone who's run a business, you don't change your brand name. Like we were just discussing that. I mean, if you're called SS Cars, I understand after the Second World War, you change your name to Jaguar, which is what happened. That's where Jaguar really Cars comes. Yeah. SS Cars was a brilliant manufacturer of cars, and it rebranded to the wonderful name Jaguar. I get that. I think that's
it's very much the
probably a good idea.
Mitchell and Webb, are we the baddies thing,
yeah. You know what I was thinking afterwards?
Have you seen that? There's a sketch with, it's a Mitchell and Webb sketch where they're wearing Nazi uniforms, right? And they're obviously on guard duty or whatever. And they're like, hey, I've just noticed there's a skull and crossbones on our caps. Do you think we're the baddies?
You know what I wondered about SS Cars is, did the SS in Germany think, we should have
these are our cars.
Yeah, we must order some SS Cars. I must have had a chat about it at some point. But yeah, changing your brand. But this isn't even government, is it? This is the civil service, but it's all the same. I don't really understand how that all fits together.
So the MOG, another government acronym, Machinery of Government.
Oh, wow.
So when you have a MOG, and literally civil servants will describe...
Not a Rees-Mogg, just a MOG.
Just a MOG.
That's going to be a seat that I'm going to love watching him lose that one tomorrow.
I'm biting my tongue.
Roll on tomorrow.
It's... Civil servants will describe their career in a number of MOGs.
Oh, really?
Because they're kind of like moving house / divorce. They can be. And the higher up you go, the harder they are, because you're accountable to the team of minions and civil servants underneath you. Normally it'll be probably the machinery of government is cabinet. They decide what's happening. From there you get into now go make it happen. But they've got these tight budgets. No way they're going to say, oh, my OPEX, we're going to go spend 100 million on a rebrand. They'll be like, my whole department runs on that. So you would have a Secretary of State or secretary who will be the minister telling the lead of the department to go get it done. And that poor person is being a civil servant following the chain of command, which is what the civil servants do. But it's that kind of waste. Like we talk about all this stuff in government. Why? Why has UKTI gone to DIT? I mean, I get the D, department. They made it a department post-Brexit.
This is a waste of time.
Keep UKTI as an agency inside DIT. Yeah. You don't need to rebrand it.
It's a brand.
And everyone's like, oh, what's this thing at an international conference?
It was much clearer. UKTI, I still hang on to. I sometimes still say it.
Taxi drivers still say it. Some of them even throw out industry and trade from like way back at 1 Vic Street. And you're like, no, Rear Admiral. Old Admiralty building. They're like, what?
This is sort of the thing about, I think business people often look at government and say, why don't they run it a bit more like a business? I mean, is it that really hard to understand that this is a brand name you've built over 50 years, or I don't know how long it was UKTI, but a while.
A long time. I think there's a balance between things you can do commercially and things you do because they would never make commercial sense, but they're right for community. And that's where government should step in. But the common sense, like rebranding for what value?
Do you think there's a solution to this? It's the same in Australia and the UK?
Can I give you
yeah, please.
There's a lovely government agency who provide finance for export.
Oh, yeah.
I won't name them.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you look at how many adverts you see, how many companies do you think they help a year?
Well, I know very few people go there. But I mean, I would guess, I don't know, 1,000. 100?
4.
No, it's about 600-700. Now, for the amount of advertising in
crazy.
mainstream press, on television, in trade magazines.
That's a very small number.
But I talk to people
It's
about
a
it. People,
shockingly
I
small
forget
number.
about them. I talk to people about it. I mean, the organisation you're talking about, I think now, so just people understand, if you get an order for overseas, let's do a simple example. You're a UK manufacturer and you get an order and you don't have the money to produce the order. So you get a massive order from, I don't know, China or whatever, say, we want 10,000 of those. And you're like, I need the finance. You know, you can go to this organisation and they will finance it for you. They will now, as I understand it, if someone wants to make an order, but they can't afford it, they will finance the overseas
They'll
people.
fund the buyer.
Wow.
They'll
Okay.
fund the buyer to buy from you.
The buyer more or less has to be a state-owned entity.
I think we're put off though by government in this country. We're a bit like, oh yeah, but it'll take forever. And you know.
If I were to say their flagship customers are big yellow equipment.
Oh really? Are
So
they?
when you look at We Help British Business, you go, the people who really need it.
Yeah.
So that's another one where government's trying to do the right thing, but are they really shifting the dial or just lubricating wheels that would have occurred
Well,
anyway?
this happens in UKTI, DBT, Austrade, whoever you want to call them. You know, there will be the big companies who are deciding to expand internationally, who have a team of 50 people working on it.
Yeah.
You know, and because it's a big brand name and the Prime Minister wants to stand next to them and say, oh, we helped these people come to the... No one helped anyone. You know, maybe it was important when you're that big that they do sit down with government at a higher level. They probably can come to some arrangements that unfortunately small businesses can't, to say, well, we will build this enormous factory in the UK. And they might say, well, we really want you to do that. Let's talk, you know, so they have some buying power. But on a base level, these are exactly the people who don't need UKTI, the people who need UKTI, or Austrade, all these organisations are the smaller businesses, you know. And they
that's
need,
where we shift the dial.
and they go back and forth. So what happens? I mean, Austrade completely pulled out years ago. You know, I remember they said, right, no more helping anyone else, you know, and then they're back, thank God. I don't know, 5-10 years ago, they came back. And that was, they stopped assisting Aussie businesses to expand internationally. They said, we'll only help people come in. You know?
Well, and this is where you get to government saying we have limited resource. And this is where
do we focus?
everyone has limited resource.
Yeah.
That is a
Nobody
business.
has
But they're
unlimited
publishing
resource.
stats saying for every pound we spend, we get £10 back. So,
The best statistic
You can
I
make stats say anything.
well,
you
those
want.
are made
So
up.
my
Most of this stuff.
favourite statistics in government, if you look at an annual report several years ago, there was more jobs claimed by the combined economic development agencies of the United Kingdom than jobs were created that year.
Okay. Well,
So
there we
you
go.
go.
I think you'll find
No, but I
that's
get the
perfectly
forms.
Credible.
Yeah, high five everyone. We're all and we created the jobs. No, you didn't. The business created the jobs. They hired the people.
Also, you don't not want the support. So say they give you an export grant or say they come and help you a bit, you know, then they give you a form to fill in saying, oh, you know, how good's this been for you? Oh, it's been wonderful. Has it created more? Oh, yeah, everything's great. You know, you're not going to say, oh, it's been shit show because you think, well, I don't want this program shut down. It was useful. You know what I mean? But it's a sort of optimistic feedback loop, you know?
And it is that part. And with the governments, I think there's this part around, for example, consistent strategy for several years. That would be a wonderful business element to bring into government. They did do that. UKTI, a great man, the late great Michael Boyd led the UKTI inward investment team for several years, and he stuck to a very clear, simple strategy for several years. And that's when UKTI really took off on inward investment because it was stable. Yeah, it might have shifted 5 or 10% year on year, but everyone knew their job, everyone knew what the objective was, and off they go. Sometimes it's like, oh, it's all about emerging markets. Now it's all about the core value.
Yeah, I think that's
markets.
dumb. I think that's dumb. I mean, I think we you know, people say very negative things obviously about the empire, but at the end of the day, we've always been very interested in international trade. The UKTI is a remnants of these sort of global places that we've traded through. You know, we followed the Portuguese model, which is like, we'll basically set up and trade, and that's what's left. And the fascinating things about them is they help, you know, an overseas business come into the UK. So they help competition into the UK. That is, that we believe in free trade. You know, we think, come and employ here. Go on.
I think it's important to say everything we're talking about is the very top echelon of government. The people on the ground are fantastic.
I couldn't agree more. And I was about to say, with any big organisation, it comes down to the individual slightly ignoring the BS a little bit and just getting on with it.
Yeah. What is the BS?
Yeah.
And it's the
government without BS, you know.
And if you look at the people who make a change, and my friends around the world who literally make a difference every day, they are brilliant at what they do, and they are creating trade and employment and bringing jobs here and innovation, and both ways. So
plus you need advice. So, and if it's controversial to say, you know, they obviously, government can't recommend things. So you get a thing where, oh, I need X in Y country, and they give you a list of 200. You're like, well, it's not that helpful. But a good trade advisor would say, well, you know, I can't say any of them any good, but, you know, I do quite like the first couple or something, you know, really casually, like, and people say, that's, you can't do it. But if you don't do it, it's really unhelpful information. You know, I didn't need the yellow pages. I just wanted, you know, oh, maybe they'll do it more like, oh, but I happen to know John is in town this week. So why don't you have a chat to John? You know what I mean? And then there is a bias there, but it's hard. Those balances are really hard, you know. Effectiveness
versus compliance.
Yeah. So,
is there something that you fucked up that you can tell us about? What did you
messed
learn?
up? We've got to swear less, I feel.
I'm tired.
Stuffed up.
No, you're right. Is there something that you screwed up?
Yeah, better word.
I reckon the one where you go home in a cold sweat. I remember working in the bank in Treasury, and I got the client order. So you got your liquidity balance, and you want to be bang on because the government gives you a rubbish rate. You'd rather put it in their commercial overnight rate. And I put the $500,000 short.
Oh, the wrong way round.
Wrong way round.
Put it in the wrong column.
And I got a very nasty phone call from the treasurer. It was only
went to bed.
So thankfully the rounding error was.
Yeah.
But that was a very good life lesson in small details.
Focus.
Matter.
Yeah.
And that was.
And small details absolutely do matter.
And having a phone call from your boss after hours back when mobile phones were just emerging, that was kind of like, that wasn't a special phone call. That was...
He's tracked you down.
Is that Paul Webster?
Yeah.
Prime Minister on the phone for you.
Down.
The Prime Minister on the phone, you were like, yeah, about time I got some recognition. Listen, you little bit.
You're welcome. What? No, that was definitely the importance of small.
Don't we learn? You're talking about the same lesson when you send the email to the wrong people. Same lesson I learned as an accountant when you get something really wrong. I worked briefly in a hedge fund. I had exactly one of those. They called up with the trade and he said, well, what was it? And I said, it was they sold. I couldn't remember. I remember getting my hair turned off. It's like, wake the hell up. You know, it's like, ring back. What did you tell them to do? I'm like, I don't know. I just, you know, I think you learn that, don't you, in life, and you realize that just got to force your brain to take a second when it matters.
And it's also about credibility, because quite often these kind of errors, they probably don't cost much. Like they may not actually, putting shorting $500,000 the wrong way, it's like one thing, but
it could cost an infinite amount if you leave it.
Things like something recently where somebody just kept getting a client's name wrong. Her name was Catherine, just kept saying Charlotte. Like every time. And it just, it didn't make any of the documents we drafted wrong.
Did she look like a Charlotte?
No, I've never met her, so I don't know.
She probably did.
But it didn't do anything to anybody apart from it made the client think, you can't even get her name right.
Yeah, that's a cracker.
Fifth time.
Yeah. You know.
So, Paul,
what else are you fucking up?
Charlotte.
You know, sorry, screwing up. What else are you screwing up?
Yeah, it's so true. Have you had, on this little journey, is there any amazing advice you've had? Sounds like your wife telling you to get out of insurance wasn't a bad bet.
It was a good bet, that one. Best advice. I tell you, the people I really am wowed by are the people who do strategy at the very high level and then zoom into granular operational, and they bounce between it. That skill set
They'll get the detail right. They can focus and be very detail oriented.
And then come back up to how the costs.
Is that not slightly some of the greatest CEOs in the country sometimes, maybe?
I do think they are very powerful minds. That ability to challenge yourself in any commercial conversation, to zoom out, to zoom in, to zoom. And the people who are natural do it, effortless. Well, they make it look effortless. But that is the one where that has been a really strong piece of advice that I've carried for 15 years now. Zoom out, zoom in, zoom out, zoom in. And does it still make sense? Right, what have you missed? Understand the costs.
I'm going to big up my brother. I was trying to think of someone I always think, God, he always says, the 10,000 feet. I mean, to be honest, he doesn't just go zoom out. He fucks off to space. But then he can come back and, because I'm so sort of dyslexic and he's not anyway. But yeah, I agree. It's a bit like when you meet someone who's incredibly intelligent, who's good at explaining stuff. That's so powerful.
Make the complex simple.
Yeah.
And that again and there's a few people I can think of, but I've mentioned the name of Ross McEwen. That guy can describe banking on a sketch diagram that a 5-year-old would understand.
Hallelujah.
And I'm
I need that.
Oh.
And I'm like, when he got made the head of RBS, I was like, oh, thank God. We've got a good person who truly gets banking in charge. And his peers were the same around the country because you pretty much had Aussies running every bank at some point. But it was just... The thing that really resonated was he made the complex so simple. And it's got this sketch diagram and you're like, if you can draw that diagram and that explains banking, you clearly get it. But yeah, they're the big parts. And the other one in change management, that was a big deal in 2009.
God, you've done all the profession. You've done management consulting, change management. You've been in insurance. You've been in banking. How do you have any friends?
I have my hamster. The thing about change management became a profession after the global financial crisis. Before it was just something that you should do is common sense and project management.
It sounds hilarious, change management. It's like, it's got to be all right.
How are you doing your projects before without it? So,
I mean, change management does sound a bit like you're just going to fire people.
It's once you fired them. Yeah, it's once a big thing's happened, you're going to basically give everyone a hug and keep talking to them about. I met a lady who does it, and she said, a bit of a secret, plants. And I was like, what do you mean plants? She said, whenever there's been a big upturn, half the staff are 2 firms put together, whatever, go and put loads of plants in. Everyone calms down. I'm like, okay.
I don't think it's going to solve
I don't know if she's any good.
The other science would say forewarning people of change gently, appropriately, making them ready for change.
Don't put plants everywhere.
I don't remember the lecture on plants, but the one thing that was really powerful that has stayed with me is whether they're 5-year-olds or 50-year-olds, you've got to tell them 6 to 12 times in at least 3 different medium.
Oh, so over-communicate.
That's brilliant.
6 to 12 times.
In
3 different medium.
I've laughed at people. It's a joke amongst the partners because if anyone sort of says, oh, well, I've told them, and people will be like, because, people say, oh, well, I sent an email 2 months ago and no one responded. It's like, tell me in 3 different meetings, tell me by email. Yeah. I want you to come around. I want you to send some gorgeous girls, you know what I mean? Whatever, just throw everything at it. Buy me a car with a note inside, I'm being ridiculous
But you get to the point if I've done that and you go, I don't know what you're talking about, you're like, so there's the door.
Yeah. The one I hate is in meetings, people always say, you try and get a conversation going, or they say, sorry, I didn't get if you could send me all the questions you wanted to ask me before the meeting, I'll have a chance to think about them and then I'll answer them better. And I also need the minutes of the last meeting. Sounds very rationally. Nobody fucking reads it. It's just a nonsense. It's like if you find it harder to be spontaneous, which I understand is really difficult for some people because they want to work on facts, which apparently I don't give a monkeys about, and it's all about
intuition.
Intuition, yeah, But there's definitely a lot of, it's a bit like in a presentation, they'll say, oh, can we get the slide deck? Are you going to really look up the slide deck later?
Amazon
are you?
Who do if you've got something to read, book the time in the meeting to allow people to read it.
Yes, that's right. No, Jeff Bezos believes in the 6-page memo. So he writes, or someone will write, you want to discuss something, you want a meeting with me. I mean, he is running this crazy company now. He has 6 pages a good length. You write a really well thought out memo. It'll probably take you a good week to write it on and off, maybe 2 weeks. You send everyone the memo, and then you have the meeting and you all sit and read the memo in a circle because everyone's busy, and you get the whole time to read the 6-page menu. And then there's no length for the meeting. You just begin to start talking. It could be 10 minutes, could be a whole day. Very fascinating. I like the memo concept. That I would read.
Yeah,
What are you going to ask?
Like
a few minutes.
6 pages is a little long.
Well, if it's a proper strategic thought piece, because one of the things I find hilarious, people go, put it in a 1 slide. Right. So you understand the context, the background, how all the other cogs fit. And then, going back to the high and the low, you can't have the high and the low in 1 page.
I think you're right, too. They will meet about something
I don't know why I'm saying
proper.
that, because the problem as lawyers is clients say, can I just have a short agreement? You're like, it's still going to be like 10 pages. No, I just want one side. One side of A4.
I owe you.
It does not work.
But
I cannot get the agreement into one side unless I do it in 0.6 of a,
Yeah. Do you want it to be effective or just
You
short?
run the corporate team. I mean, imagine if we said to you, which we probably should, write us about it. And you're going to have to have a section on mum numbers, find out what the numbers are. You're going to have to section on new business. You're going to have to explain how it works. I mean, when you get into it, you're already in page 3 or 4, aren't you? You may as well put a diagram on number 5.
I know. I still reckon I could do it in 4 pages.
Yeah, you can. I don't think there's a hard and fast rule. I just remember him saying like a good length.
If in doubt, leave it out. That's
so
my thing.
our final question, the big one, the big kahuna burger of the entire show. What do you think is bullshit? Well, in your current industry, I guess, the industry of international advisement or
advisement is not a word.
Is it not a word?
I don't know, it might be, but it sounds bad.
We'll go with consultancy. Every region's different.
Mm-hmm.
I can line up every region in England, listen to half of their pitches, and you would hear over 90% of it is exactly the same.
Oh, so it's bullshit to say, it's different here, it's different there.
Yeah.
Globally or just the UK
Is
you're
that because
talking
all
about?
humans are pretty much, like, when it comes down to it, quite similar?
They spend all their money on the rebranding.
Yeah.
No, I don't think they understand the businesses enough. I think they have a solution and they make you fit their solution rather than say, I'd love to hear someone say, no, we're not right for
Much
your
more
business.
powerful. People keep turning up, setting up anyway.
Well, let's just say if I'm a shoestring startup, I've literally got 50 quid and I'm like, I'm going to go start a business. With all due respect, I'm not coming to Ori Clark. And nor am I going to go to KPMG or a Big Four or anything else. If someone's, it's got to be a right size solution. People oversell or try to, they won't say, no, this isn't right. I'd love to see that get lost. Just bugger off.
Yeah. It's amazing how powerful honesty is too. In our job, if we have to be terribly polite, but I should probably say it a bit more often to people, like, we're not for you. What I do say, you don't need a lawyer.
You don't need a lawyer. Do it yourself.
In fact, worse than that, a lawyer could really, well, no, but worse than that, a lawyer could really bugger you up. Yeah. We could cost you as much as this deal is, and you'll be more confused at the end of it. That lovely stat that you don't really sue anyone for less than about $500,000. It's not worth it in the UK. Well, think about that next time you're getting a lawyer out to do a contract. Does it really matter if you're not going to go to court?
Yeah.
No, but but if I would just, if you're not going to go, if you know you're not going to go to court, you want the agreement to be really good because you don't ever want to have to enforce it.
Yeah, there's that argument too. I think you still need a piece of paper because otherwise you're basically going to fall out.
Yeah, so that would be it. More honesty, no, we're not right. You can't be right.
But how do they know whether they're right or not? I mean, that's what you do in a job.
Well, that would make them a good business advisor.
Well, the regions therefore need to think carefully about building clusters that are sector-based and say, look, most of our towns have got video games or life science. I don't really know there's a community here for you.
The bigger ones are good at that, but at the end of the day, they're still measured on job creation and number of businesses, not a qualitative score of how did that ecosystem go.
that would be the better way to develop it, and much easier to ascertain. To say, look, we're Bradford or wherever. At the moment, we've got three tech incubators. If your job is to basically just try and create more of an ecosystem, you'd get to know the incubators. You'd say, what are you good at? Let's bring it in. And it would be easier to go along in 5 years and say, well, there's only one of them now. So you didn't help.
Two really good examples where the British government have done an astounding job. Automotive industry.
Even now after Brexit.
Shift in the dial of how much is made in the UK. If you go back to 2010, that dial has shifted a lot.
Really?
I don't have the exact number, but it's going to be a 25% shift in because they understood the value chain. They understood what was imported. I'll give you an example. You make a Mini, you put 4 wheels on it. We were importing 4 wheels to ship them back out. We started making the wheels here because they went and found the companies who could make the wheels and got them to set up and invest. Brilliant. Offshore wind. The industry didn't exist. They created that from scratch. And the team behind that, Karl Marx.
You're kidding me.
Not the Karl Marx, presumably. I mean, maybe.
Karl Marx. Retract that.
No, I love the idea.
Karl Marx, Mussolini.
When I wasn't writing Das Kapital, I was doing offshore wind.
I will scratch that. That's why that name was so familiar. James Brown, Mark Adams, Carl. Those guys really did create the offshore wind here. And if you look at...
Oh, right. He was called James Brown.
James Bell.
This is the funniest. James Brown. Karl
When
Marx.
he wasn't on stage singing.
Oh
Do you know
my
what
God.
it is?
Jimi Hendrix. They all got together. They got together. Largest offshore wind.
Let's just assume there was some...
I knew he was alive. God damn it.
Dude can sing.
Let's just assume
Not
there were
this
some
James.
good people in offshore wind.
Let's
and
just
leave it
say
at that.
James Bill, Mark Adams, Carl did a wonderful job. And if you're in Hull, I'll give you an example of how good it is. We're in Hull and people said, what are you doing here? And we said, oh, we're part of the British government. And they're like, and we were seeing Siemens who built the factory up there. And they're like, you brought Siemens? And we're like, oh, here we go. Can we buy you around? What the?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Because they were so stoked about what had happened to their community. That was a good day in the job.
Well, there's the argument. Why do you bring
That's
in
a nice
trade?
story.
That was a brilliant.
I mean, countries should do business with each other and set stuff up with each other. And we should be open because actually it's not quite what you think about. And it's about clusters and it's about...
Brexit.
Yeah, I know Brexit's crap. But I mean, we still can go and do business everywhere if we want.
No. This is the Quickfire round.
okay.
We're going to ask you a list of questions to get to know you a little better. And you have to answer as quickly as possible, which is not very quick. D, cue the music.
What was your first job?
Golf ball collector.
Okay. How do you
about
get paid per golf ball or just
$2 an hour.
Okay.
In a live driving range on the side in the trees.
Oh, my God.
What was your worst job?
Scraping chicken muck out of KFC deep fryer.
Oh, man.
Sorry to all the vegans out
That
there.
sounds bad.
My wife, who's a chef now, tells me that's how you make great gravy. But that
You don't really want to
traumatised me as a
scrape it
child.
yourself.
No.
Favorite subject at school?
Oh. Economics.
Oh, what?
I
Do you want
to
to
do
try?
that. No.
I don't know what to do.
I think that was as much to do with the teacher. He was
really?
a great
It's
teacher.
always the teacher, isn't it?
Yeah, maths and economics. My teachers were fantastic.
I had a maths teacher who was quite Mr. Barnsley. Anyway, from his Hovelitissimo, he's from Yorkshire. But I mean, he was like,
I'm
he was
glad
actually,
you clarified that.
sorry.
For the
his name
international
is on the top.
audience.
But he was quite mean to us. But like a teacher doesn't always have to be nice. Like he was quite mean, but I think underneath it he was kind, but he was quite hard on you. But because you're a teenager, so he kicked your ass a little bit. But he taught me loads, actually. I always think of him as a teacher of like he didn't inspire me. He just, anyway,
It went
All
in.
your stuff.
it went in.
What's your special skill?
Special skill. I think complex structures implemented.
That's what I tell my wife anyway.
Boom, boom.
That was a long bow.
It worried me earlier when our producer started saying he wanted to show us his snake. Anyway, my snake? Was it not? Oh, someone else's.
That makes it
Actually-
worse, D.
What's your special skill?
Wingspan. I'm an orangutan.
You got really long arms.
Yeah, I'm 190, but my wingspan's 205.
Oh shit, you'd be a good boxer.
Well,
You're big to be a
bit
boxer.
soft.
Good reach.
Could just do that thing where you hold somebody at arm's length and they
that's
flail.
I'd still.
Oh, I love doing that to my kids. Anyway, no, I don't.
Let it rip.
It's your go, my go?
It's your go. I did special skill.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, I wanted to be the branch manager in Margaret River.
Brilliant. That's the winery, Margaret River Winery.
Surf and wine.
Oh, I mean, what else
Loans in the
is there?
day to farmers for tractors. Surf in the morning, bottle of Margaret River Shiraz in the evening. What's not to like?
Bitter how's your father just past 10 past 5.
What did your parents want you to be?
Oh, so my mum is Irish heritage, heavily Catholic, priest.
She wanted to be a rock star.
Well, she's one of those classic. One's got to be like a.
Have you got siblings?
I've got 4 siblings.
anybody
so it would
a
have been like
priest?
no.
Oh.
I have 2 nuns in the family.
Okay.
So that was quite a good track record for one family. But yeah, you sort of go, Irish. They'd want a doctor, a lawyer, probably a dentist. But then it was like priest would have been. I reckon priest was third.
Priest.
And then teacher, and the fits or spares in case something goes.
Done. Is it my go? What did your parents want you to be?
No, we've just done that.
Oh,
Done that
I
one.
was like, pay attention.
I have attention.
Dad was at a
I
home.
need to tick them off like you. You've got a system. I don't have a system. Look at I fucking draw all over it. What's your go-to karaoke song?
Sweet Home Alabama.
Oh, that's a good one.
That is a great song. And also a great film.
Yes.
Rom-Com.
But a good, I really enjoy that.
Sweet
35,000 feet.
Alabama.
Start crying.
I've got a trainee at the moment, sorry, I just mentioned this, whose specialist subject is rom-coms. He can tell you every single rom-com and whether it's good or not.
Ooh.
It's amazing. Ooh. He's also very good.
Are you actually getting any work done this season? What happens in episode 2? Oh, well, what happens?
Shut your ears, Romes. Office dogs, business or bullshit?
I'm learning to make it business.
Good diplomatic.
Yeah.
Bullshit. It's okay to say bullshit.
I think
he doesn't speak that much English.
He's asleep. He won't care.
I've never worked in an environment where you've needed to have that work-life element. I mean, my dad grew up in very remote Western Australia, and the saying I say to our kids is, Granddad didn't have vet bills.
Granddad didn't have vet bills.
Work that out.
Okay.
Yeah, common in a lot of countries. The care for dogs, particularly, and cats, but dogs especially, I think, France, Germany, the way it's different.
Well, I think, the farmers have working animals.
Yeah.
Not pets. And
they've got to pay their way, effectively.
yeah, and it's horrible. Like, they are, and they love their dogs, but they're working animals. And it is a tough one. But there is a blend. I'm coming around to, I understand why. Now in today's world, much more modern, much more flexible. People are working longer hours. It's a different system. So yeah,
the amount of horses that used to die here in London. And actually probably that gave us an exposure to working animals that we don't really get exposed to working animals anymore. There's farm animals, which is a slightly different thing from a working animal. It had a job with a purpose for us. It corralled sheep, it hunted, we kept dogs because they were bloody useful at defending us, killing stuff, finding stuff. I mean, the sort of our first machine man ever had, if you want to put it, or our first sort of real combined, the dog and a man became so much more powerful. In fact, they argue we don't have the sense of smell for distance, we can't tell if a predator enters the room because we spent so long with dogs that we lost this ability, because it's really unusual in mammals.
Because they're stinky.
No, I mean, just because they would hear it and see it, they'd smell it. Their sense of smell was much better than ours, and we've got this incredible sight. I mean, it depends on the dog anyway, but I do find it fascinating.
It's your go.
Have you ever been fired? Oh,
Well-
wait.
we had a change of government. Is that the same thing?
Yeah, I was thinking, wait a year.
If I'm not back in 12 months, you have your answer.
Yeah, the change of government, is that being fired? What happens in a change of government? You get a memo? Yeah, you see it on the TV?
You probably work it out for yourself, yeah. So
kind of a
Do you think anyone misses the election, turns up to work the next day? Do you know what I mean? Is that possible?
I think if you're a special
because
advisor
they've
to
all
a
been
Tory
in Purdah
minister.
and they're thrilled by the fact they've got 2 weeks off or 6
But
weeks off.
the civil servant stays the same, but you're allowed to, when you get in power, you
The
can
civil
change.
servant does, not a special advisor. Ministers bring their own special advisors.
Spads have no, like, normally
every
have no
minister,
qualifications at all.
every minister has a what? A person who like follows them around as an individual special advisor.
Spads.
A few spads.
Normally children or children you won't admit are yours. Or,
Couldn't they have called
that
them
kind of thing.
spaz?
If you can count how many you had.
Yeah, which some people can't.
Okay.
That
But
you know
what
of.
roughly, if I'm in if I'm at a higher level of government, I'd have a couple.
If you're a Secretary of State, you'd have several. And I don't know how far down the ministerial ranks, because you have junior ministers. They would probably get one.
They're like second in command. So I'll be a special advisor on military
No,
within
they're
the
an
Home
advisor,
Office.
They don't make decision.
But they come to you and you would be like, I represent a military.
You would represent the minister, and then the minister would instruct civil
No, but the
servants.
subject, my topic, that I'm
Yeah,
a special
yeah,
advisor
correct.
in, I would be like, I know a lot
Do you
about
know
how the
what?
military works.
Theoretically, that is how it should work.
Right.
It's not really
I studied,
how it
this
does
is
work.
another thing in English culture. I studied history. Now I work in commerce. What the fuck? Like that in Australia, you study what you're going to trade in.
Oh, I see.
Okay,
Yeah. No, we don't do
rules.
that. We don't do that.
So we're like, I remember working in the bank in Northern Trust, and it was like, you did geography, you did history, you did languages. What do you know
What
about
did you
the
do at
bank?
university?
Engineering, business finance,
see?
mechanical engineering, business finance.
Good with
And actually,
numbers.
we don't account. I'm okay at maths. It was one of the subjects. I'm just not. I wasn't very good at school. Dyslexia and all that.
Engineering can't be bad.
Well, I like making things, and I was sort of making guitars at the time. And then when I turned up to engineering, I asked where the carpentry room was, and everyone laughed. And then I worked out there was only one girl out of 110 people, and there were only 4 people who spoke English as a first language. Like most people didn't. They were like Thailand and everything, and it was just bewildering. It was like, oh my god! So it was all male. And there were only a couple of people who I was like, oh my God. And actually on the second, third year was funny because then there would be people like, I'd be like chatting or something. And then you'd have like this hilarious conversation. You'd be like, where have you been? You're like, well, I've been here all the time. I just really, my English only just got good enough to chat. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, actually, the only other person doing my course at university was very, very Greek. She was called Aphrodite Gatsu.
There were only 2 people on your course.
Yeah,
That
only
must
2
have been
people.
awkward with
Really?
the lecture.
How?
I was doing
You
a very specific course. I was doing
God, that's awkward with the
Greek.
lecturer though, isn't it? Anyone?
I did ancient Greek and
Oh, wow.
ancient history. So
Wow. That's very impressive.
yeah, it doesn't fit
But
you
then
out
law,
for any
how did
job
you-
because you get out of university. I did an MA in classical literature, and then you realise that really you're not fit to do anything. So you have to actually get a profession.
So this is a big cultural difference between our countries.
I think it may explain.
I could have been a lecturer, I suppose.
how we
but I
have
was
this-
a-
Librarian.
Yeah.
We have
Language
shared.
teacher.
This very clever Kiwi guy used to fix British business. Explain, I can't do the accent. He said, like you have shared decision making in British companies. So the market, you go into. He says, I'll go into a boardroom. I call it the room with the tea, and then the CEO will be making the marketing decisions. The marketing guy will be making finance decisions. The finance guy's trying to run HR, and the whole thing's a complete mess. The CEO is having a mental breakdown, and you have to go in and say, like, stop. He's in charge. Yeah. You all report directly to him. Get out of this room. Work out what you need to do. Tell him. He will advise you whether it's correct or not and what the strategy is. And there's a real truth to that bit. And I said, well, how the hell are we successful? And he says, you're good at government because you're good at politics. You're very open in
Socialise.
terms of sharing. We talk about it a lot. We have Radio 4. We all try and be open. It's chaos. It's terrible. But there's a discussion, a debate going on.
And this is why they say Boris was a bad parliamentarian, because he didn't discuss and bring people on side.
And also lying to Parliament is
He was
makes
a
you
bad person.
There's that
I think.
bit too.
Being an out-and-out
But
rogue
in-
is a problem.
There's other bits. But I remember one of the House of Lords members saying the key to being successful as a Prime Minister or anyone in a very senior position was you had to communicate with the opposition, and you had to spend time in the House and talk and learn and share. And they said he's rubbish at that.
I think I would imagine he's rubbish at anything which requires him to spend time doing something and make an effort.
Or talk about something not
It
him.
sort of shows that he's not really, it sort of shows with the narcissism.
Yeah.
It sort of shows he's not really a people person underneath it. You know, he's
He's
just
a
got
massive
charisma.
narcissist.
Yeah, of course, but it shows that aspect because you don't care enough. Anyway, we must move on.
Final one.
On the special advisor, optimism. They come to work on Friday.
What?
Yeah. What's your vice?
Vice. I can't walk away from movies. That's not really a vice,
Really?
but I just
That's
love
good.
movies.
I love
Because
a
otherwise you
movie.
go,
Love a good
look,
movie.
you put it at any bottle of red wine. I love red wine. I'll try
What's
it.
the last movie you saw?
June 2.
Thoughts, feelings?
It's slow moving.
Fucking long. I mean, I'm not sorry. I swore again.
I've watched
It's
about
quite
half an
long.
hour and I
Be
fell asleep.
patient. Even with altitude, the aeroplane.
He's very scrawny.
cried
At
in
1.5
action.
times speed.
He is. He's not your masculine
It's not,
superhero, is he?
Not gonna happen, right.
I'd say there's a challenge from Marvel. Make that guy, I can't remember his name, Timothy Chalamet.
I always call him Chalet, but I don't think it's Swiss Chalet. But
If
I don't
you
think
can
that's
make
right.
him an Avenger with muscles, hats off, because that is some work to do.
Yeah, but they did it to what's his
Paul
face?
Rudd, Ant-Man.
Yeah, no, I was thinking of Jeremy Allen White. It's got
Jesus
massive
Christ.
guns.
Who's he?
Have you seen The Bear?
Have you seen his snake?
Yeah.
That guy.
Okay.
I'm out my depth here. I'm totally out my depth
No, so
here.
this is smooth. So like movies.
I'm
were-
aware of the film. I fell asleep after half an hour, but it had been a long
No,
day.
June 2 was long,
is
slow. The one that you just go, you can't make a worse movie, but they don't stop trying. Expendables 4.
Oh yeah, Expendables.
Okay, does it require you to have seen Expendables 1 through 3?
No, definitely not.
No.
Explain it to you in about. What was your favourite film?
Ooh, of all time?
Top 3. You can give me top 3 because one can be.
I want to know what
painful.
this
Oh,
is
that's
interesting.
a good question. Do you know what? I think Ben-Hur has to be up there as one of the greats.
But Charlton Heston, such a mentler in real life.
Oh, can't go there.
You're
Otherwise,
not-
you can't
it's
watch
not real life,
any
like-
films.
yeah, but yeah, I get that.
I mean, let's just put it this way. My wife watches Jason Statham films. You don't need volume.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
She's just like, whatever.
And
Yeah,
what's your favourite film?
I always think I sort of have to do 3 Jaws, Blues Brothers, Bugsy Malone. I'm a massive fan of.
Bugsy Malone.
Oh,
That's so
I love
cute.
that film. Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. I mean, that's just fucking incredible. But I've got probably some recent ones, but Pulp Fiction, things like that.
Oh, yeah,
It's
good.
just like,
Another one on the list, Any Given Sunday.
oh, that's a good one. Is that the first Bob Hoskins film? No, that's.
Kevin Costner, NFL.
Oh, okay.
Anything with Kevin Costner in it. Or what was
Yeah,
it?
not Waterworld.
Thingy. The one where he's got his watch on through the whole film, Robin Hood.
And I don't think you can come from our generation and not say Star Wars. I still, as a young child,
Original 3.
Yeah,
not
the
the
original
second.
3.
Yeah.
Just,
You mean episodes
I still watch
4,
them.
5 and 6.
Correct.
Right. So that's it. Top tips for founders.
Any tips for founders or entrepreneurs?
Make sure you're ready for international expansion and be prepared and resourced and milk all the free information you can get
Hire somebody good.
and then get good advice and consultants.
Boom, smashed it. Okay, now we're going to do our medium favourite part of the show. You need to get a paddle. Here's a paddle. You'll see on one side of the paddle it says business, on the other side of the paddle it says bullshit. We're going to
Dee,
say
when are we
some
getting
things.
our extra paddle?
Yeah, where's the extra paddle, man? I feel unpaddled. I mean, you can't paddle a boat with 2 paddles. Not this way.
I mean, you can paddle
Yeah,
a boat with
shut up.
2,000.
But we've only
That's
got
your
one
cold
paddle.
open, I think.
Yeah.
Number, you remember engineering? Not good with
So we're
numbers.
going to name some terms. You need to see whether it's business or bullshit. You need to hold your panel up. You need to
Okay.
say it's bullshit, and then we might challenge you and generally harass
Okay.
you. Cue
Oh,
the music,
Jesus, you got a whole
and
stop.
we
We're not
won't
gonna
do
go
all
through
of
all of
these.
those.
We'll do half of it.
And we'll decide we don't want to do half of them. Equal paternity leave, business or bullshit?
Business.
Do you want to challenge that? You like a good
yeah,
challenge?
I mean, do you feel strongly about do you think the maternity policy at the moment is you can take it equally?
I came from Australia where we didn't have it and we just lost an income and we were both equal earning individuals. And I think there's just different families will have, not all women want to be at home, not or men want to be at work. I think you get a fixed amount, share it. You can't double dip. But I think it's
fascinating. In Iceland, they do 3-3. You have to take, the man has to take 3 months off and be in charge, and the woman goes back to work. So because what it changes with the mathematics, it means the woman's only out of work 6 to 9 months, which makes a kind of difference. Plus, the other really interesting it does, it makes all men have to become parents. You have to, you've got to put the other person in charge. And that's a really good discipline for the men, and it bonds, and it's great fun too. I can say as a dad, when I get opportunities to be on my own, it terrifies my wife, but for me, it's absolutely fantastic. The kids love it too, because they're like, Dad, can we do this? And I'm like, yeah, let's do that. I just like say yes to everything. Anyway, but I think that's interesting to force it, I mean, it's quite controversial, but if you said you've got to share it by at least 3 months.
I'm okay with government telling people what to do when it's, the hard part on this is when it's good advice. And the question is, why is my opinion on good? If that aligns with me, that's great. But sometimes a cultural thing here in England, liberalism.
Yeah. My libertarian brain was like, I wouldn't like that if they told me you had to do that.
I haven't been breathalyzed in this country in 11 years. You try and drive through Sydney for a week.
Really?
Really?
Yeah. You couldn't get away
Well,
with
that's because here, as I understand it, you can't pull someone over unless you have reasonable suspicion. It's a liberalism within the thing. So the police can't. They set up
booze buses.
Booze buses. They just shut the road.
Come on in. Everyone gets tested. 5 cars pull in. Let the next 5 go.
I don't know whether it's the same now though. But
I'm glad they don't do that here.
I do think about
why
about 15.
No, I don't agree with it.
15, 20 years ago, there was this sudden, like all the adverts and everything, which made drinking and driving suddenly a taboo thing to do. I mean, I'm sure people
took a long time,
but it's generally thought of as like antisocial.
Yeah, I don't think there was anyone going, ha, smash 2 bottles of wine, I'm driving. But it is one where you go, let's just say on a Thursday night in December, there's probably a few cars that
set up
be
a
on the road.
roadblock and see
Whereas
what
in
happens.
Australia, you just go, nah, find alternative.
It's your go.
Right, yeah, have I done that one? London Stock, guys, we've only done one. God, I have to crack this out. Sorry, Pippa. Pippa's on holiday tomorrow. London Stock Exchange, the main market.
Well, it's business, FTSE 100.
Yeah, I
mean,
checking,
it's a world class.
This is a throwback to our discussion about getting the little things right.
Yeah.
Politeness, spelt wrong.
Particularly in this country, it's got to be business. You can't not have British manners. I think that's one of the great things of this country.
Is it appreciated in other countries? Do people think we're polite?
Yeah, very much so. You got to be careful.
Because we see ourselves as hooligans abroad. There's that aspect of British culture too.
I don't. There's a gambling.
I don't know if I see ourselves as polite internationally or.
Let me rephrase it. The business community is seen as polite. There's a gambling company that's got an ad during the Euros, which does a wonderful piss take on the British culture. They go, "What do you love about the Brits?" The way they embed themselves into the local culture.
We're the worst integrators in the world. We're like, we better set up a fish and chip shop, teach them our language.
So they just, their ability to learn foreign languages.
Do you want to do the great thing about Empire again at this point?
Yeah. No, there's a really funny one about that. Exactly. If you ask people, well, who's the worst in the world at integrating, they'll be like, oh, well, it's the X country or whatever, and actually the Brits, we're the ultimate, we won't integrate. We will turn up with all of our stuff. Yeah.
But to be
Americans, I guess, a little bit too, maybe.
More modern.
Probably slightly more nowadays because they've got more social capital.
I'm liking these answers, but we'll only do a few more.
Yeah, go on. Oh, is it me? Hashtags. Business or bullshit.
Do you do a bit of hashtagging?
No. I mean, I understand their function. It helps you find things.
You don't follow any. That's the trick, apparently.
Yeah, no, I don't follow any.
Because you sort of can follow a subject like international.
I follow organisations, people.
Yeah. But are you on LinkedIn? Are you social?
Yes. Yeah. Prolific, I think.
Are you quite prolific? Are you?
Yeah.
Do you do the photos after each meeting?
No.
Yeah, you need to do a photo.
Someone did a really good article, which is there's 3 LinkedIn posts. One is like, I'm telling you about a talk I did, and it starts with, thanks to all the team for having me talk.
Yeah.
The other one is, generally this achievement or something, how great am I? And then it's plug your organisation, which is obviously very useful. But you sit there and go, okay, when people are publishing the white papers, research, where they are in the world, I'm at this conference, really useful. Who's where, and you think about it, you've got your global Rolodex in one app. I think it's fantastic. So it's useful, but the hashtags, I don't have time for that.
Yeah. Foreign espionage risks.
100% business.
Yeah.
There is a brilliant company in the UK from America. UK lead is a great guy called Dennis Murphy. They're called Strider Technologies. And their job is to deal with that and find that in your organisation that you may not be aware of. And
Andy, I've been meaning to tell you this, but actually I'm a Russian spy.
So I...
Double bluff, eh?
Wow.
But the thing is, you won't believe me if I tell you I'm a Russian spy. I just don't have credibility.
Well, it's because I haven't met you at the meetings.
There's no way that guy could pull that together.
Vodka.
Wouldn't it be disappointing? You say you're a spy, and the government, the police are like, nice.
Johnny English.
Yeah, exactly. Don't think so. Mate.
Influencers. Business or bullshit?
I think one of your previous guests answered that very well.
Really?
I think, yeah.
You've been listening to our podcast more than we have. I don't know what that was.
So if you want, great example, COVID. They hired all those BBC actors to say, go get your immunisation.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Wonderful use of getting a public message out. And I think
shame they don't do it more often, to be honest. There's a lot of shit we need to be explained.
And it's also going back to the change management. Great way to get your message across. When you're doing it and you've got, like, I love the stories of influencers go bankrupt because they don't declare their gifts in their tax returns, and the tax returns.
They build up.
And you go, and going to kids, don't believe what you see. There's a lot of...
That's a funny one, because as a tax person, they say, no, I'm not working. I've got a social media account, and, people then give me stuff. It's like, you'd be amazed how the revenue have cottoned on to that stuff and decided they quite like to tax it because you're putting sexy pictures of yourself online and you're essentially selling pornography, there's nothing wrong with that. Go for it if you want, but by the way, it's taxable.
Let's not promote it.
No, I'm big with that. I had the great pleasure of meeting the CEO of OnlyFans the other day. Fantastic woman she is. Irish lawyer, libertarian,
she spoke at Money
feminist.
2020 last year.
Her name is, because I'm rubbish, I'm really sorry. I thought you were fantastic. I want you to come on this podcast. But yeah, she was brilliant. And I find things like porn such an interesting line of something that's, we shouldn't have taboo about, but we're terribly awkward about it.
No, but there's two different things there, right? There's no point in getting into it now, but there's two different things. There's yes, I agree with that, but there are certain industries that people are manipulated in and oppressed in greater numbers than other industries, and porn is one of them. Yeah,
but I'm not sure OnlyFans is part of that. I think if you compare it to the alternatives, that prostitution is legal, you're not allowed to have a brothel or a madam or whatever, a pimp, but you can sell sex, private services, person to person, and that in person is much more at risk than doing it online when you've got the credit cards, the addresses, the money. The worst thing that's going to happen, you could break a computer, you can cut people off, you're in control. And if you ask the people who work there, it's a bit like they offer mothers and they can work 2 nights a week and earn as much money as they could work all week, and if you got it, if you're hot, that's up to,
Killers wrote a song about it.
I've said everything wrong. Please forgive me.
Do you want to do a last one?
Oh,
was that
Pippa,
I can't remember.
You'll still be friends with me, won't you?
Probably not.
Anyway,
I would say,
one more, one full up.
Watch Avenue Q on the Muppets for adults.
Let's do. I think either's good. Let's do Financial Conduct Authority.
The new version?
I don't know what is the new version.
Well, that is the new version. Yeah. But the previous version, the GFC.
That was when a rebrand actually was good, because it wasn't just a rebrand; it was a new organisation.
And it was also explaining what they did. But
someone sorted it out. They've lost their way a little, I hear, but they were absolutely world leading initially.
They still are. They're still good. I think they used the phrase, and this is a bullshit phrase, the world's most supportive regulator.
That is a bullshit phrase. Need to work on their phrasing there.
Yeah.
Probably one of the least annoying regulators from the
in
annoying
Britain,
regulator
in the south
department.
of England, related to financial services, possibly.
Well, Webby.
What are you giving him?
What do we think? We need to confer on these things. I thought he scored very well.
I did too.
I think we have got carried away with the scores, but I'm happy to give him 15,012 points.
Get it.
If I overshot, do you think divide by 2?
No, I think that's fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's acceptable.
15,012 points. That's very good score, Paul. Congratulations. You'll be up on the leaderboard in the tiny room that
When we
doesn't
get
exist.
around to working out what everybody's scores are.
You've been absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much, mate. Anything else you need to tell anyone? How do they find you? LinkedIn or something?
Call Laurie Clark. You'll find me here in the very near future, and looking forward to it.
Fantastic.
So there you have it. That was this week's episode of Business Without Bullshit, and we'll be back with our quiz, Business or Bullshit, on Thursday. Until then,
It's ciao.